All right, Brian, let's continue our film examinations here. We'll start with Ryan Pellum, then we'll get to Roger Saleapaga. And Pelum is a guy who, look, I don't expect him to play as a true freshman. I think there's one area where he could, and that's in the return game, because Oregon right now, I've talked about this throughout the offseason. I did not like Oregon's kick return game. I think Tez Johnson as a punt returner was good, but the kick return game, the numbers bear out that just wasn't very good. They didn't have a single kick return over 25 yards last year with a variety of guys, and Gary Bryant Jr. was kind of the lead returner and whatnot. So I think that should be an open position battle for Oregon going into next year. That's a way that a true freshman could crack the rotation if he wouldn't otherwise. And Pelham is a guy that just brings a lot to the table on that front.
I like his ability to make guys miss. He's got a lot of moxie. He knows he's good. Not the biggest fella in the world, and he's definitely a slot, at least for now, until he adds a little weight. But yeah, as a return guy, I think, he's got to at least be in the mix. The only thing that I would say there is Oregon looks at this two ways. Yes, he can help us there, but freshmen tend to do what when they get their hands on the ball?
Fumble.
Yeah, fumble.
They can't.
So it's they
can. I mean, that's not necessarily the word on him. It's just that
at the college level, it's a whole different deal.
True freshman is tough.
I worry about his strength. When somebody pops him, holds him up, and the next guy comes in that benches 415, wants to rip the ball out. And that's exactly what Oregon staff's going to look at too. Because if he was on the other team, that's what they would try to do. So I still think he's more likely to be a reserve receiver and get some reps. Later in the season's more likely. They need to see it for a while. This is a team that should make the playoff. They're not going to jack around with having a freshman in a playoff game as their punt returner. I can all but guarantee you that. I wouldn't like it either. But man, he can run. The only thing about him, he needs to improve tremendously as a route runner. He was so physically gifted, he just ran away from guys in high school. He's got a long way to go there, which most guys do. But once Pelham gets that, man, he's a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah, and in 2025, Oregon's receiver room is just going to be in a state of massive flux. Evan Stewart probably off to the NFL.
Bye.
And then Trayshawn Holden, Tez Johnson, Gary Bryant, they're all out of eligibility, and there will be just a big void. And I mean, the next two guys that I think will be on the receiver depth chart for this year are Jurion Dickey and Kyler Casper. And, Dickey could play in the slot a little, but Kyler Casper's not playing in the slot. And Dickey's probably most well-suited to play on the outside. So that slot receiver position, I think, is pretty wide. The Tez Johnson role is pretty wide open in 2025. And Pelham's a guy who, if he puts on that sort of weight and refines his route running a little bit, has that yards after catch ability that you love in someone who, not that he couldn't necessarily catch the ball down the field, but he's not the biggest guy out there. You're not going to throw him, 50-50 jump balls. You're going to throw him the ball over the middle. You want him to catch it on a slant, on a drag, on a deep dig, or a crossing route, and then you want him to make plays after the catch. I feel like that's where he'll really thrive one day.
I've seen him do it at the high school level, but you're right. He's going to get beat up on 50-50 balls his first year or so. Needs to add 10, 12 pounds, then it's a different deal. Until then, sometimes it's okay just to run a screen and let them chase the rabbit.
Yeah.
It's okay. That's what he is. He's a rabbit.
Right. Let's get to the other guy whose film we're talking about here, and that's Roger Saleapaga. One of the most interesting prospects, I think, in this 2024 class for Oregon. He reminds me of Kingston Lopa from the defensive side of the ball in that I see positional versatility here, because he's listed on 24/7 Sports as a wide receiver. I think he could play tight end, Brian. Am I nuts?
No, he's a flex tight end pretty much right now. That's the way he is. I mean, there are kids in the South that are listed that way. They're even more athletic than him that are listed. Big tight ends that play out wide are just receivers. You can call it flex tight end. It's just a big split end because they're not blocking anybody. Who cares? And that kid will go into a crowded room and go up and take a pounding and catch the football. He's kind of nuts. He kind of fits the old school mentality of a blocking tight end, but he's not quite there weight-wise. 210, 220, somewhere in that range. But he's tough as nails, has great hands, and he'll go into the middle of the field. Oregon needs those kind of guys. So I bet he's 235-ish by the time he's done filling out at Oregon, and he'll be a nightmare in the screen game, et cetera, as a blocker, and he could be really good in the red zone too.
Yeah, I like his size. He's what, 6'3", 6'4",
correct,
in that sort of range. And what stands out on his film is you just look at him and go, all right, so he's tall, but he's also got really good timing, and he's got that ability to be a legitimate red zone or 50-50 ball kind of target. I see a little bit of Terrence Ferguson in him. Kenyon Sadiq is a guy that I think could easily be Oregon's tight end one for 2025, and I think he takes a big step forward this year. Tremendously talented player who also, Sadiq that is, played receiver in high school or just kind of lined up out wide. Sadiq played a little as a true freshman. He has bulked up, I think he said 20, 25 pounds a little bit in the offseason. Now he looks more physically ready while still maintaining that great athleticism. But is there a player in today's college football or the NFL that you would jump to with Saleapaga and say, yeah, he reminds me of this guy. He's that sort of target, or the way that you can get him the football?
I don't know if I'd go with one specific guy, but I mean, Kittle was so like 200 pounds when he enrolled at Iowa. So sometimes you can't.
George Kittle, that is.
Yeah, I mean, like, yeah. I'm not saying it's George Kittle, by the way. Kittle's extremely fast. But he went from a wide receiver all the way to just straight up tight end because he's a dominant blocker too. He's about as rare as it gets. So you just don't know how big guys are going to be able to go up to and still keep their twitch and their nastiness. But again, he's a physical kid and he's got size. So I think there's just a lot of guys in that mold now. And if you don't have one, it hurts you in the screen game and it hurts you in the red zone. Everybody wants somebody like this, and this is a targeted player to fit that role, I think, by Dan Lanning and the Ducks.
Yeah, and I hope that, at least one, if not both of these guys see a little bit of run or get to make a play or two in the spring game, because, we can look at film, but at the end of the day, depending on where kids are coming from, the quality of competition they're going up against, you don't always know. But I think you get a better idea of what a true freshman's timeline is when you watch him in this sort of environment. Perfect example is Jaleel Florence, who you may remember from Oregon's class of 2022, and he, came in as a true freshman, played in the spring game, and I remember watching him thinking, he got beat on this play, but he looks physically like he's ready to be out there, and he looks fast enough to play, and it just seems like he's going to have a timeline to play that's quicker than a lot of other true freshmen. And what do you know? He played a significant role in 2022. He was Oregon's number 2 starting quarter in 2023. He's probably that again, assuming health in 2024 as well. So that's kind of what I look for with these guys in the spring game is how do they look when you're surrounded only by Division I, Oregon football caliber bodies? Because in the high school film, as you know, Brian, they're surrounded by what? Sometimes 2 or 3, or if you're in a really good area, maybe 7 or 8 Division I players. But now when it's all around you, I think that's just a good moniker for fans to look at and go, okay, yeah, that guy's ready, or no, that guy's not ready yet.
You can tell usually, even if they're not going against great competition, because they'll dominate it. If it's a kid that doesn't want to put his foot down on your throat, those are the kids I worry about no matter what their competition is. Like South Florida, there are times when there are 18, 19 guys that are Power 5 kids on the field at once. But there's still a guy out there that wants to dominate everybody. You got to look at it that way. That determination, that kind of separates good from great. So this kid, he wanted to pop everybody in the nose with how he played. So he'll be fine at Oregon.
Great stuff as always. Brian Smith, our Locked On Recruiting Insider here at the network. Brian, thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time. Have a wonderful rest of your day. And as always, go Ducks.